Hey, you're listening to the Debugging Dan podcast. Join me on my morning walk. My topic for today is that AI gets never enough. And what I mean by that is that the frontier with AI keeps moving. So I'm going to go into that, what that means for me in two different points. It's basically on a model level and on a skill level. So what I mean with on a model level is that the model that you were working with like a year ago, doing development, either code completion, some agentic development in your IDE, and a model that you used a year ago, it's no longer enough. Sonnet, Opus, they keep releasing new versions. There's now even Fable, which is a lockdown version of Mythos at Cloud, at Anthropic, which is even a new class of model, which they now have reopened. It's more expensive, but it's better. So you get the feeling that you should use it. You cannot just stop and think, hey, I'm using GPT-4. I'm doing okay. The results are okay. Let's just keep doing this flow. It just keeps going on. Maybe I need to use this newer model. It's better. But with the newer model comes an updated workflow. So currently I use Opus when I'm using Claude for planning. I use Sonnet for implementation, and I go back to Opus when the implementation is too complex or the agent doesn't really understand it. And I prefer to do it this way for cost, but also for other reasons, like the environment. If I'm using Sonnet, and Sonnet is enough, why should I use a more expensive, a more token-hungry tool, energy-hungry tool like Opus, when it's just overkill? Because I try to, be mindful of the use of AI, the downsides. That's why I try to feel that Opus or Sonnet is enough. But what I then hear or read online is a lot of people that were only programming using Opus. They have a $200 cloud subscription. They're now trying to move to Fable to get even better results instead of being more mindful and trying to use the right tool for the job. At least that's in my opinion. The way that I've been working, it's always been sufficient to plan using Opus, work with Claude, and the same for the OpenAI models. And it's even in the past, prompt engineering was still a thing. So you needed to be really mindful of what you were typing, how you were giving the instructions. And it was really a skill that you were developing in prompting and, giving the right files in context instead of just typing and having the model figure it out. But the newer models, they are better in tool calling. They are better in finding the results in your source code, the things that they need to look for. So prompt engineering gets less important, with the downside of needing to change to newer models, more expensive models, updating your workflow. And I guess that's not really a downside, because the models are getting more intelligent, but the way that you're working with the models, it keeps shifting, it keeps changing, and you need to keep iterating. You need to keep up. And that brings me kind of to the second thing. Instead of only the models that keep changing, your personal way, or the way that you use AI in programming, at least for me, also changes. So I started with Copilot in my IDE. I did mostly code completion. That's what I used it for. There was no agentic back then. I moved to Cursor because the code completion was better. And Cursor then, I believe, was one of the first tools that started doing agentic development, where you gave it a prompt, it got to work, and it presented you with the result. And now, I guess, I see the industry moving, or maybe it has already moved, and I'm already starting to lag behind, to doing agentic development where you don't really need an IDE anymore. You just give the agent a prompt, it starts working in the cloud or on your local computer, and it presents you with the result. You only need to review, give some comments if needed, and it continues again. And as a developer, you're only doing reviews, writing up specifications, and no longer doing programming anymore. You're maybe not even touching the code anymore. And of course, I get that's growth, that's change, but it also, at least for me, it gives me an overwhelming feeling. It gives me anxiety. It gives me the feeling that I need to keep up. I need to stay up to date with everything. I cannot just start a project, define a way of working, and like 6 months later, I'm still using the same way of working. No, I have already needed to iterate small things, maybe bigger things in my workflow to keep up, to keep improving. And I have the benefit, or I'm lucky to work in a business, in an organization where there are multiple people working with AI, and I can learn with them, and we share knowledge, we share information, and that's a benefit. But it's also a downside, because you also get a lot of FOMO. At least I do, when I see other people, they're working and they're sharing, hey, I'm doing this now, I'm using this tool. Has anybody seen OpenClaw or the Hermes framework? And I'm feeling, hey, I'm not using that. Am I missing something? Should I do things differently? So that's that's the second thing, that you really need to keep changing. And that, of course, that already used to be the case with frameworks getting updated, new major versions of framework, new frameworks, different ways of doing things. But AI has really accelerated that flow. Things that you're learning or doing this week could be really different in the next couple of weeks, because there has been a new way of working, a new finding, a new thing, a new service deployed by either OpenAI or Anthropic or even Google. They had a big keynote and they're adding this and that. And of course, improving working with AI means that you're getting more efficient, or it should, and you're spending less time on a feature, building a feature, or maybe the feature itself, building, takes the same amount of time, but it takes less amount of time from the developer, because a lot of work is done in the background by AI. And for businesses, that should be a good thing, I guess, because people spend less time on getting the same result, so they're getting more efficient. But the downside there is that their customers are saying, hey, I see that you're using AI. If you're using AI properly, you should be getting more efficient, so I'm going to pay you less. So the margin that you receive because you are building with AI doesn't end up in your pocket, it ends up in the customer's pocket. At least that's the case in a company where I work, which is an agency, where customers are like that. And the relationship with the customers and hourly tariffs are important. But the business model isn't really fitting anymore. So I guess that's the challenge. And it's not really giving me that much of anxiety that I'm crippled or I'm getting burned out, but it is something that keeps me on edge, that there's a voice in my head that keeps saying, hey, you're doing it like this, are you still doing it correctly? And I can imagine that because of my interest, I'm a person that tries to keep in the loop, with new developments of models, local execution, new tooling. So I already try to keep in the loop there, but I can imagine that if you're a developer that is less curious or less interested in that kind of thing, and you just say, okay, the company told me to use Cursor or Claude, I'm going to use it. I think it kind of works like this. You hear some tips from colleagues and you just start working with it, and you don't really follow the bigger picture. I can imagine that you get even more anxiety. Or if you're a developer whose preference is mostly the technical stuff, typing the code, you're going to have a bad experience in the coming months, years, because most companies are moving away from that. That's the part that AI can do really well and more efficient than all the people that still like to code. So that's a challenge there, I guess. And it's not keeping me up at night. It's keeping me thinking. Let me know what you think. If you have any comments, remarks, just let me know. You can find the podcast on YouTube. It's in your favorite podcast app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can reach out to me on Blue Sky. The links are all in the description. There's a website, deepinginthedan.com, where you can see all the podcast episodes. And I'd like to hear from you. Have a great day. Bye.